Hi, pleasure to be here. My name is Scott Sandland. I'm the CEO of a company called Cyrano.AI. We do linguistic and psychographic analysis, and I'd like to take a moment just to give you a little introduction to who I am and what my company does, which I think helps frame the perspective of what we're going to be talking about today. So my background is as a clinician. I was the executive director of a mental health clinic. I had a private practice for about 20 years. I did a lot of work with at-risk teens, drug-addicted adolescents, and high-functioning executives and professional athletes. And so that means that I was running a clinic where I watched the teen crisis unfold. I watched all the bad things that we've been talking about and hearing about on the news, and I watched all that happen. And so about 7 years ago, I said, we need to build something that scales, because I was hiring and training clinicians, and that was not fast enough. And so I decided that I needed to build an AI system. I said, the kind of therapy that I do is a little bit like chess. You know, it's a strategic game where we're figuring out what sacrifices are being made and how to optimize that for fewer sacrifices. And I know AI is the best chess player in the world. If I can teach AI to play chess with words the way I do, then I can build a scalable solution. Long story short, we did, and it worked. And it works quite well, and I can talk about that in a moment. But that's what we built because we wanted to help people. And we did it based on two very simple beliefs. The first one is that speech is a behavior. So the same way that Netflix and Amazon and a bunch of other companies can use past behavior to predict future behavior, we can look at your speech and analyze that and say what you're thinking and what you're going to do. Also, that quote down at the bottom, no matter what a person is talking about, they're telling you about themselves. They're telling you how they organize information, how they build relationships, how they learn, what their values are, their commitment level. Anybody who's in here who's in sales knows that they can kind of do that. It's called soft skills. It's empathy. And all we did was build a scalable system that can do exactly that. So this is our company in about 50 words, which is about half the number of words we need to create a report on the person. So just to run through it real fast, we need about a minute of speech. We don't care about the inflection of voice or anything like that. We care about the words. So we can do this with your Twitter feed, we can do this with social media, emails, etc., and turn it into actionable advice. Bullet point, simple advice. And we did this for mental health and social good, but the first thing we did was we put this in sales because ethically that makes sense. Ethically, we wanted to put this in a place where there was an equal relationship because what we're adding is asymmetry to any conversation. So we didn't want to put this in the place of vulnerable kids. We wanted to put this in a place where we could say, okay, let's prove it. So we increased sales conversion by 26% and reduced time to sale in the same split test by 44%. So big changes and like it says, patented. And at the bottom there is we went to the United Nations AI for Global Good conference to present, but most importantly, we went to have our ethics audited. And we went and found AI ethicists. One of them who's here, actually, I just ran into him in the hall. And we said, we want you to audit our frameworks because we understand that anything that can be used for good could be used for bad. And the potential is reciprocal. And we want to make sure we're doing this right. We don't want to move fast and break things, especially when we're thinking about our end in sight is helping kids and other vulnerable populations, but especially kids. So this is why. When you look at what philosophers call the quantifiable definition of God, all-knowing, all-present, and all-powerful. Not a surprising list. You know, that's what we think of when we think of what is God or what is a God, depending on your religion. All-knowing. Well, instant access to all information, we've got a chunk of that. Now, with technology, we don't have 100% of any of these, so I don't want to go overboard on that, but just kind of keep score in your own mind. All-knowing. We don't know everything, but the things that are known can be known by anybody now. You can go to Khan Academy, you can go to Wikipedia, you can go to Google, Udemy, whatever it is, and you can learn. A bunch of people at this conference have taken online classes from Harvard, Stanford, and MIT in machine learning. And you can just know these things. Next is all present. I think during COVID, we all leaned heavily on Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And when just switch the reverb. Let's go for it. As we needed Zoom, as we needed Teams, as we needed to be telepresent, it worked out just fine. And now we can be anywhere. My nephew was just studying abroad and he was FaceTiming me from all over the world. And when we're here at conferences, we can Zoom with our family members and our customers and our coworkers, and we can just use it. And now this third one, all powerful, starts to come into play with LLMs, especially with API function calling. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what this really means, is all the APIs. You're looking at libraries like Hugging Face. You're looking at the tools like Zapier and PyTorch and all these different tools that have all these abilities. And with ChatGPT, you can just now click on the plugins, add APIs, and you can just ask it to do something. And it can figure out which APIs to use, which tools. It can co-pilot for you. In the last week, Microsoft and UC Berkeley just came out with the thing that they're calling Gorilla. It's an LLM, but it learns how to use different APIs incredibly efficiently. So you don't have to name the API. You just need to say, I want to be able to do X. And it will come up with the list of abilities required to make that happen. It will break it down into all the parts, find the best APIs for the job, and deploy it. That means what we have just achieved is abracadabra. It's magic. You can just speak into existence a functionality, a skill, an ability. And you don't have to know how it works. You don't have to know how to do it. You can just want it. The gap between wanting and creating just got really, really short because of LLM API function calling. So is it 100%? Of course not. But you can synthesize real world materials. This is not just about writing code. You can say to a 3D printer, make me a thing that looks like a thing I saw. It will find a picture of the thing you saw, and it will make a 3D model of that. You can also do it with chemistry. You can say, make me a new insecticide, and it will. Molecules changing because of words you speak into a microphone is a crazy thought. And that's happening. But let's back up, because those first two we've had for a while, right? Those first two are smartphones and the internet. And so as we're adding, I think, the scariest one, the one that makes things real, let's think, how do we do with the first two? Let's just take a quick moment to audit, how are we doing before we add the third one? And so you say, what happens when you add 2/3 of the definition of God to a 14-year-old girl? This is what we're doing in 8th grade all over America. And the answer is, she dies a lot. It's not a good story. The population with the fastest growing suicide rate in America is 14-year-old girls. The leading cause of death for people under 25 in America, the second leading cause of death for people under 25 is suicide. These are crazy numbers. When I went to the United Nations, I got in a bunch of trouble because I was on a panel, and one of the things that I said out loud was, who cares how warm the oceans are if the kids are killing themselves on purpose? And that was provocative, but I meant it. We have to look at what's going on, and what are we going to do about it? We have to pay attention to this because we were warned about this a long damn time ago. So let's look at these two stories, because the Greeks were really good at talking about what happens when the power of gods shows up in mortal hands. And the first one's a story about a guy named Narcissus. Sounds like narcissism for a reason. He's a guy who fell in love with his own reflection. got closer and closer to it, abandoned all other people, ends up falling in the water. How many of us have been so self-absorbed that we reread our own LinkedIn posts? Guilty? Yeah, okay, you and I are the only honest people in the room, cool. How many of us have been on vacation with our families and taken time away from vacation with our family to look at some pictures we just took of the vacation you're on? We have these crazy moments of self-absorption. And the Greeks warned us that that wasn't a good idea. And you look at the TikToks and the Instagrams and all those things that are just derivatives of that same story. How many followers, how many likes. My wife and I have jokingly talked at dinner about which of our LinkedIn posts got more views and comments today. And 90-something% joking, but there was a little competition in there, if I'm being honest. But let's jump over to the other guy. This one more of you have heard of, Icarus. This was a boy whose father made him wings so he could fly, escape a bad situation, but his technology. He wasn't a god, he was a mortal who was given technology. It was wings. And he flew. And just like all technology, there's unknown unknowns. And so in the unknown unknowns, he flew too high, the sun melted the wax that was holding the feathers, and the kid fell to his death. And that's what we're seeing play out on a global, generational level right now across the planet. Loneliness, isolation, anxiety, depression, deaths of despair, drug addiction. Basically everything the American Psychological Association measures has been getting worse for about a decade. And in many categories, the rate at which it's getting worse is accelerating. So as we're adding all these tools, we're saying, what happens when you put the power of God into the hands of children without any training? And it's not a good idea. But I know what you're thinking. Scott, great story so far, but none of this applies to me because of those things. I make an API that helps make financial transactions happen. Or I make an API that updates sports scores. Or I curate a set of APIs for shopping. Let's talk about it. So these 9 categories represent most of the top 75 frequently used APIs in America. There are definitely some things that don't make it onto this list, but this 9 represents a lot of what happens with APIs. And it's all really useful stuff. But now let's add LLMs to it and see how it can go wrong, and let's do it by picking on me. We're in Vegas. Let's say I go to a Raiders game, and you hack my system. So you break into my phone, and let's just use the right side of that list. Social media scrapers, text data mining, and email and phone integrations. You use the right side of that list, you hack into my phone. And you send a message to everyone in my social media and everyone in my phone. Via email, text, Facebook, whatever you want, you can call them. And it says, hey, sister, father, neighbor, friend, old high school person I haven't seen in a decade. I'm at the Raiders game. Here's a picture of me at the game.
Take this off because it'll make it bang.
Well, when that touchdown was scored in the second quarter, because we have sports updates at the top left, I was cheering and my phone fell off the balcony and shattered. And I was using Apple Pay.
Okay.
So I don't have any way to pay for stuff. I'm using the phone of the guy next to me. Can you Venmo him $50 or $100? And then I'll pay you back when I get home. For those of you guys who use APIs a lot, how many pennies did I just spend to defraud everybody? It can sound exactly like me. And with my API, I can psychographically profile every person in that list and customize the message to be more emotionally influential to that person. And then it would sound like me when they had follow-up questions. It would act like me when they had follow-up questions. And for pennies. And that's just an easy one. You could do the same thing with data privacy, with security at your company. How about, hey, because of the storms, my flight was delayed and my bag didn't make it. I need the new login to get into the system. Can you resend that to this machine instead of the machine I normally use? There's a ton of ways you can very easily use LLMs to mass scale all those cons, all those scams, all those things that we hate when they call our parents, we can now make infinitely more profitable. Very, very easy. So that's a problem, obviously. So here's the thing. A lot of the things on that last list were all about dopamine generation, right? And we need to pay attention to this because we're training, as Joanne, the woman from MasterCard said in her talk, we're training the future right now. We are training the future. And this is how we're doing it, is caveman versus machine. We all know what the alignment problem is. The alignment problem is basically when AI and humans aren't aligned on our goals and values, humans will lose. We need to make sure the systems that we are creating are aligned with our values. Because whenever we are not aligned, it will be way more powerful and way more effective than we are very soon. And the systems are being trained on the stuff I just showed you. So bad actors, companies the size of nations, manipulating and influencing us into spending more time on their site, things that are making all the kids unhappy, is how we're training for alignment. That seems like a bad way to do it. So how can we do it better? First principles engineering. Elon Musk gets a lot of credit for this. He deserves it. He created Tesla. He created SpaceX with first principles engineering. Let's look at what the first principles need to be here. 2 chemicals. Polysynaptic neuromodulators, they're just hormones. The one on your right is the one we need to talk about first. It's dopamine. And because we're in Vegas, it's everywhere. Vegas basically runs on dopamine, right? Gambling, big shows, entertainment, sex, alcohol, drugs, bright lights, partying, all the stuff that sounds very fun but is unhealthy generates dopamine in you. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok all generate dopamine in you. And we've accidentally created AI systems, we've created algorithms that optimize for generating dopamine in you because the absence of it feels like a withdrawal. And so all these multi-billion-dollar companies have figured out how to get to, as in the social dilemma, they talk about race to the bottom of the brainstem. So let's jump over to this other one, oxytocin. That's the guy. That's what we need to go to. What's oxytocin? Your wedding day, the birth of your children, your best friend's wedding, the moments where you feel real connection, real honesty. A good friend of mine, Dr. Richard Nongard, he talks about it as belly button to belly button communication. Just you and me right here. That's oxytocin, and we all love that. Why have we not built the AI systems to do that? What if we could? Wouldn't be difficult. All we'd have to do is, instead of having filters that make you look less like your honest self, right? Because that's what all these cameras do. They're like, oh yeah, portrait mode makes you look prettier. It smooths out your wrinkles, reduces blemishes. The button is saying, hey, you're not good enough by your own standards. So we're going to make you good enough digitally. What if instead we had real honesty and intimacy online? Because the Wright brothers invented the plane crash. So we give ourselves credit for the thing we built, but we don't think about the unforeseen consequences. And when the kid falls out of the sky, we need to ask, who made the wings? So let's think about the wings you're making. Let's think about the planes you're inventing, and let's find the crashes. This is why airplanes have rules. I just flew here from California. You have other Californians in the room. You know that the first thing they do is they tell you, in the event of a water landing, a life vest is under your seat. What are the odds that you hit water in between California and Las Vegas? Like, you gotta be a good shot. But the rule is still good because that means while I'm on the back of the plane, powerless, I know the supply chain was good. I know the pilots have rules. I know that if anyone acts a fool, they're going to get on the no-fly list. We know there's good rules, and we can apply that. Almost done. I know I'm going to be really close on time. Accountability, policy, intent, API. Easy to remember. I'm not going to tell you how to do your jobs, but I am going to tell you how I'm doing mine with another company that's here. Sensadia, wonderful group of people. They've got a booth right around 200. It's the big purple one. Go check them out. This is basically what we've talked about. Is I said, I want my API to be safe. I want to be able to make sure that the intentions of the people using my API are honest. I want to make sure that my API doesn't go in the wrong hands. I want visibility. I want control. I want flexible actions. I want things that allow me to make sure it's being used ethically and well. And last slide. Oh, it's a good idea. Last slide. Why I think we can do it is Cupid and Psyche. This is one of the only tales in Greek mythology where things go well and have a happy ending. Cupid, we know him from Valentine's Day. He's the guy who shoots the arrow and makes you fall in love. Psyche, she was this mortal woman. She was just a girl. And they said, hey, Cupid, go play a trick on her. Go mess with her. He goes and he falls in love with her instead. He says, I don't want to play a trick on her. So they punish him. The gods punish the two of them. And through love, through honesty, through the two of them working together, they overcome all these obstacles, and the gods change their minds. Apollo ends up marrying the two of them, and they live happily ever after. That basically never happens in Greek mythology. But when you add the power of the gods with mortals and oxytocin and love, it actually worked. So the things that the Greeks were telling us about thousands of years ago, they laid a blueprint out for first principles engineering to help us. So as we're all talking about LLMs, APIs, and what's happening, generative AI and all this stuff, we need to be aware that the answer is already solved. We just need to make the move to make it happen. If you want to go to Cyrano.AI/trial, you can see how my software works, or you can go to that purple booth that I just mentioned. They have a demo of my stuff and their stuff at the same time. I'd love to talk to any of you about this stuff. If you have questions about the ethics or the responsibilities of how to put all these things together and unforeseen consequences, I'd love to be part of that conversation. So thank you all very much for your time.